Hello, my amazing Algebra Half students. This is Mrs. A, and I love math. And today we're talking about Lesson 105 and Lesson 105. Both editions have the same lesson. And we're talking about powers with negative bases. So this is what we're talking about. We've got -2 in the parenthesis, and outside we have a square. And then over here we have -2 without a parenthesis, and out there we have a square. How are these different, and how do we do them? So basically this one, because the -2 is in the parenthesis and the square is outside, that one really means -2 times -2. And -2 times -2, remember when we have a negative times a negative, we end up getting a positive. So this is a positive 4. Okay, over here though, we have a -2 squared, which is the same thing as the opposite of 2 squared. Negative times something is the opposite of 2 squared. So we bring the negative out for a little bit, and the 2 squared is 2 times 2. So we have 2 times 2 is 4, but then the opposite of 4 is a -4. So one of our results was a +4, and the other one was a -4. So how do we handle these? Okay, if the minus sign is not protected by the parenthesis, then hide it with your finger. So this one is protected with a parenthesis, but notice this one is not. So what happens when I hide it with my finger? Then I just get 2 squared. 2 squared is 4. The opposite of 4 is -4. So I hide it with my finger if it's not protected by a parenthesis. I evaluate what's left, and then I pop it off and make it the opposite of that. So it works pretty easily. So there's your first board. Okay, so first let's think about what they mean. This one means, since the -3 is in the parenthesis, it's -3 that is being squared. So that is -3 times a -3. -3 times -3 is a +9. Okay, here we have no parentheses, so we're going to cover up the negative because it really means the opposite of whatever is following it. We cover it up for a minute. We get 3 squared is 9, and then the opposite of 9 is -9. And it's just that easy. So here we go. We have to evaluate a squared and -a squared if a is -2. So when we're evaluating, we can slide the -2 in. Now, the a is the -2, and the square applies to the a. So I'm going to say, well, if I put the -2 in a parenthesis, that's the same thing as the -2 sliding in, because the whole a is squared. Therefore, the whole -2 is squared. So when we're evaluating, we take out the variable, we put a little parenthesis where it was, and then we stick in the value. So if I were going to do that, I would say, oh, we're going to take the a out, and we're going to leave a parenthesis in its place with the square, and then we're going to put in the new number, -2. -2 squared means, since we have a parenthesis, -2 times -2, which is +4. Okay, so down over here, we have opposite of a squared. So negative stays outside, and then the a squared is going to be -2 squared, and we're going to have the opposite of -2 times -2. Okay, so the -2 times the -2 is a +4, but +4, opposite of +4, will be -4. Here's our last example, and then we have some practices. So here, every time we take out a letter, we're going to put in a parenthesis. So we're going to bring this one over here. We've got a squared minus a times b squared minus b squared. So this is kind of the skeleton of our equation here. So a squared is going to be replaced by parenthesis -2 squared. And then the a will become the -2. And the b will become the -3. And then the other b will become a -3. So notice when I did my skeleton, I brought everything down, and when I had the variable come out, I put a parenthesis in. So instead of a squared, I put parenthesis squared minus a, and instead of the a, I put parenthesis, and b squared is parenthesis squared minus minus, and then parenthesis squared again. And then I went back in, since a is a -2 and that a is a -2, I put the -2's there, and then the b is a -3, so this was a b and this was a b, and now we have to evaluate. So -2 squared, since we have a parenthesis, is -2 times -2, which is +4. And then we have a minus -2. What is a -3 squared? The -3 squared is going to be -3 times -3, which will be 9, minus, and we have a -3 times a -3, which is a +9. So we're a little bit closer. And now we finish it up, okay? So we have 4, and then minus the opposite of a -2 times a 9, that's a -18, and then the opposite of that is a +18, minus 9. And that's going to be a +4 plus an 18 is a 22. Take away a 9 is going to be 22 minus 9 is 13. And we are ready to do our practice problems. Okay, so here's our first practice problem, and there are only 2. So remember, we're going to first start with the skeleton. We have an a squared b minus a b. So we're going to pull out the a and put it in a parenthesis. So parenthesis squared, parenthesis where the b will go, minus parenthesis. There's our skeleton. So now this first one was an a, so we go grab the a, it's a -2. We put it in the squared pouch. And then we go grab the b, it's a -3. And then we have the minus, and then we go grab the other b, which is a -3. We're so close. -2 squared is going to be 4 times a -3 minus a -3 is just +3, isn't it? And lastly, 4 times a -3 is a -12, plus 3 is a -9. And now we have one more little practice to go. This is our last practice. So here we have b squared minus a squared b. Every time we pull out a variable, we put a parenthesis. B squared minus a squared, squared, and b. Here's our skeleton. So now this was a b, so we go grab the b. This was an a, so we go grab the a. This was a b, so we go grab the b. And we're almost there. Now let's evaluate this. -3 quantity squared, which is -3 times -3, which is 9. Minus -2 squared, which is -2 times -2, which will be 4. So it's the opposite of a 4, or a -4, times a -3. So now, last step, 9 minus a -12. 9 minus a -12 is 9 plus 12, which is 21. And that is the last practice on there. And this is Mrs. A, and may God bless your day.